The first dawn light crept over the ovens of the bakehouse, casting a warm glow on the rows of empty shelves. Hanna Embergrove stirred the embers of last night's fire, the smell of wood smoke and baking bread wafting through the air. As she worked, the silence of the morning was broken only by the sound of her own movements, the creak of the wooden spoon, and the soft crackle of the flames. The shadows danced on the walls like dark fingers as the light slowly grew. The bakehouse was a place of routine, of comfort, where the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of the ovens wrapped around Hanna like a cozy blanket. But as she slid the first tray of bread into the oven, her gaze fell upon a book waiting on the counter, its cover bearing her name in fresh ink. The ink seemed to gleam in the morning light, like a whispered secret. Hanna's heart skipped a beat, her curiosity piqued, as she wondered who could have left the book and why. The air was filled with the sweet scent of rising dough, and the sound of the oven's gentle hum, like a lullaby, seemed to match the beat of her heart. As she worked, the sun rose higher in the sky, casting a warm glow over the bakehouse and illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. The silence was almost palpable, a living thing that wrapped around her like a shroud. Hanna's curiosity got the better of her, and she opened the book, her eyes scanning the pages as she worked. The words seemed to follow the rhythm of her own movements, the cadence of the baking process. She felt an eerie sense of familiarity, as if the book had been written specifically for her. As the morning wore on, Hanna found herself becoming more and more engrossed in the book, the words weaving a spell of fascination around her. The oven seemed to hum in time with the book's rhythm, the heat and the light blending together in a way that felt almost alive. The air was filled with the sweet scent of bread, and the sound of the book's pages turning, like a soft whisper, seemed to match the beat of her heart. She felt a shiver run down her spine, as if the book was watching her, waiting for her to uncover its secrets. The bakehouse, once a place of comfort, now felt like a threshold, a doorway to a world she didn't fully understand. As she read, the shadows on the wall seemed to grow longer, like dark fingers reaching out to snatch her. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the sound of her own breathing and the creaking of the old wooden beams, like the groans of a living creature. The book seemed to be drawing her in, deeper and deeper with each passing moment. It started with small things. A tool moving on its own, a door creaking shut in the stillness. Hanna tried to brush it off as mere imagination, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. The words in the book began to shift and rearrange themselves, the pages turning with an otherworldly speed. The air grew cold, the shadows cast by the ovens twisting and writhing like living things. Hanna's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in short gasps as she felt the presence drawing closer, its attention fixed on her with an unblinking gaze. The bakehouse, once a place of warmth and comfort, now felt like a trap, a prison from which she couldn't escape. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the sound of her own ragged breathing and the creaking of the old wooden beams, like the groans of a living creature. The presence seemed to be waiting for her, its patience wearing thin as the darkness gathered around her like a shroud. The ovens seemed to loom over her, their heat and light beating down on her like a physical force. Hanna felt like she was being pulled apart, her mind and body torn between the familiar comfort of the bakehouse and the creeping horror that seemed to seep from the book. The shadows on the wall seemed to be moving, twisting and writhing like living things, as the presence drew closer, its cold breath on the back of her neck. The ovens of the bakehouse began to perform their own work, the bread rising and falling with a rhythmic precision that was both beautiful and terrifying. Hanna stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the ovens as they seemed to work with an otherworldly power, the heat and the light blending together in a way that felt almost malevolent. The last page of the book was blank, but warm to the touch, Hanna's name fading from the cover as if erased by an invisible hand. The air was heavy with the scent of burning bread, and the sound of the ovens like a mournful dirge seemed to echo through the bakehouse, a funeral march for all that was lost. The darkness closed in around her, like a suffocating shroud, as the ovens continued their work, unmindful of her presence. The bread, once a symbol of life and nourishment, now seemed like a mockery, a cruel joke played on her by some malevolent force. And then there was silence. The ovens fell still, the bread rising in the cold, dark space like a tomb. Hanna Embergrove pushed open the door of the bakehouse, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of life. The oven stood silent, the bread rising in the cold, dark space like a tomb. He saw the book lying open on the counter, the pages blank and unmarked. And then he saw the name, faded but still visible, a whispered promise of what was to come. Hanna's hand reached out, his fingers brushing against the cover, and he felt the weight of the story, the cycle of dread and fascination that had consumed Hanna Embergrove. The air was heavy with the scent of old bread, and the silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the sound of his own breathing.